Former university student Matthew Hyde, who pleaded guilty in what I'm calling the UWI torture case, has been sentenced to 15 years and 7 months in prison. I'm going to break down the ruling for you. I'm going to tell you how the judge got to that particular sentence, and I'll tell you what happened in the case. Thank you so much for joining me courtside. I'm Dionne Jackson-Miller. So this is an absolutely horrible case. I remember when we first heard about it, when we got word of it in the newsroom, we couldn't even believe it, because it's like, what? How could a university student hold another student captive in his dorm room for 3 days, torturing her while burning her, perhaps I should say, with a hot iron? And the news about this story broke in February 2023. That's when it happened. In September 2024, he pleaded guilty to assault occasioning, meaning causing actual bodily harm, false imprisonment, malicious communication, and 4 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. That's really serious harm. So he was sentenced, as I said, to 15 years and 7 months on the most serious charge. So that's the one I'm going to focus on, and I'll explain why later. And I'll also tell you how the judge got to that decision, how she got to the 15 years and 7 months. First, though, let me go through the details of this case, and I have to tell you, this sounds like some Criminal Minds stuff, all right? You know, you ever watch Criminal Minds where you have them serial killer where kidnap people, lock them up in our basement and torture them till then kill them? Well, thank God we didn't have any murder in this particular case, but I can tell you the rest of it honestly brings to mind Criminal Minds for me. So, what happened? So, Hyde and the young woman, the complainant, were students at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. They were living on hall and they had a relationship, and the relationship ended. So on February 6, 2023, now she visited him at his dorm room to deal with a disagreement they had had. Somehow or other, he got into her iPad, he saw some pictures, he saw some videos that upset him, and he accused her of cheating. And that is where everything began. So he was pushing her. He started by pushing her, and he continued pushing her. He held her by her neck until she couldn't breathe properly. And he asked her questions, and if she took too long to answer, he'd hit her in her face. These actions now, that is what led to him being charged with assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Having said that, he held her against her will in his dorm room for 3 days. Now, he says it was for 1 day and that she stayed voluntarily the other 2 days. Well, you may or may not believe that, but he pleaded guilty in this matter, and there wasn't a Newton hearing. Why am I saying this? A Newton hearing is a hearing that is held when the accused pleads guilty to an offense, but the defense and the prosecution differ on the facts, or some of the facts on which the person is going to be sentenced. So in this case, for instance, she says she was falsely imprisoned for 3 days. He says it was 1 day. If there was a Newton hearing, it would be kind of like a mini trial on that particular issue. Both of them could present evidence, and the judge would make a decision as to which one it was. Now, because there wasn't a Newton hearing, the law says that the accused person then has to be sentenced on the version, meaning the story, that is most favorable to him, that is most beneficial to him. So in this case, it would be his story, that is 1 day, versus her story, that is 3 days. Now, he told her to take off her clothes, and then he took videos of her. He forced her to apologize, and he put it on his status and sent it to a friend. This is the basis for the charge of malicious communication. This is a cybercrime. It falls under the Cybercrimes Act. And the Cybercrimes Act says in relation to this particular offense that a person commits the offense if the person uses a computer to send to another person any data. In this case, we're talking about the video that is obscene, that constitutes a threat or is menacing. In this case, we'd be talking about it being obscene, and that intends to cause or is reckless, meaning don't care, as to whether sending it causes annoyance, inconvenience, distress, or anxiety, whether to the person you're sending it to or to any other person, in this case being the complainant. Now, why is this being called a torture case? And the judge herself used that word. So Hyde plugged in a clothes iron, right? And when it was hot, he burned her in different places all over her body. He told her to go into the bath and he threw cold water on her burns, and then he put a burn cream on the burns. She begged him not to burn her again, and he burned her again. He burned her on her breast, he burned her in between her breasts, and at one point he said to her, "I think a thank you is in order." So he told her he was going to burn her face, and she begged him not to burn her face, and he still did. He burned her on her right jaw, on her left jaw, on her nose, her lip, her chin, her forehead. He burned her also on her arms, her right arm, her left arm. And at one point he told her to stand up so he could appreciate his artwork. The judge said when you looked at the pictures of the burns, you could see the shape of the iron printed out on her skin. The judge said, you know, when you look at the flat side of an iron and you see the pattern caused by all the little holes that I guess the steam or the water comes through, the judge said you could see the pattern on the iron seared into her skin. He hit her with a belt, he kicked her, he restricted her movements, and he restricted her from drinking water. And the ordeal ended when the police came, when she had been able to communicate somehow with a friend. Try to imagine the impact all this had on her. The judge said she suffered second-degree burns. And the Mayo Clinic says a second-degree burn is also called a partial thickness burn. It affects the first layer of the skin, which is called the epidermis, as well as the second layer, the layer underneath it, which is called the dermis. And you can have blisters, pain can be terrible, and it can cause scarring. She also suffered hyperpigmentation, meaning some patches of her skin became very dark compared with the other patches around it, and she's a pretty light-skinned person. Then the issue of keloids, her developing keloids was an issue, and monthly injections were recommended for that. In her victim impact statement, that's when the court hears how she's been affected, she spoke about the pain she was in, that she couldn't wear clothes because of the pain of the burns, that she could barely walk, that she couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep, that she needed help to do even the most basic things. She also suffered psychological injury. She was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. She couldn't continue studying at UWI. She actually dropped out. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She was so badly affected, she tried to commit suicide, and they had to hospitalize her. And her mother had to quit her job to stay home and help take care of her. The monthly injection she needed had to stop when her father was unable to work. At one point, the accused contacted her, and she described how painful that was and how it led to her having nausea and panic attacks. All right, so I mentioned the sentence, but here's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to end this video here because, again, I'm trying not to have the videos too long, and then I'm going to break down the sentence in the second part of this video, which is going to come very, very quickly. Don't worry about it. Just look out for part 2. That's when I'm going to deal with sentence. Thank you so much for joining me courtside. I'm Dionne. I'll see you next time.